Welcome to the Rest of Us podcast. I have Dr. Peter of Hybrid Spine and Sport here with us today. You're located in, this is just technically Roswell, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It said Roswell on. But then when I read Crabapple, I was like, is that Alpharetta?
It's like we're right on the border.
Right on the cusp of it. And you just went to a Sturgill Simpson concert.
Yeah. Yeah. That was last night. It was great. We had tickets to see him like 3 years ago whenever he was playing in Alpharetta. And like a day or two before, he strained his vocal cords and had to pull out. And he hasn't toured since then. So he just started to tour back up after 3 years. So wasn't sure exactly what it was going to be like, but it was
Did they
such a
send you
good
like
show.
a refund and then let you know of a new event? Or did you just know because you're...
They replaced him with Tyler Childers at the time.
Oh, okay. I like him too.
It was great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I listened to more of Tyler at the time, so I was kind of happy.
That worked out. Yeah. I'm late to the party. I only found him like 6 months ago. I went on a weird, like I wasn't into country music and then someone showed me him and then now I have a country playlist and it started with like 6 of his songs. So
Yeah.
that's how it happened. He was the gateway of country for me.
It's a good one. Yeah. His vibe and Dylan Gossett and Wyatt Flores and some other people. There's some good people there. So.
It's the music style and I really like his lyrics. I think they're beautiful. I'll even look them up and I'm like, Lucas, this song is communicating to me. It's so beautiful.
That's good.
Did you, and that was in Duluth. Did you grow up here?
So I'm originally born in Toronto.
Oh.
And grew up here. So I moved down here when I was 3 or 4. So I like the heat.
Sometimes it is crazy to me that I will be in New York or I know that there's Montana. My parents live in Idaho and that there's a whole country north of that.
Yeah.
That an entire nation lives up there.
Yeah, they're freezing their balls off up there.
Even when you said Toronto, I was like, oh, the Canadian kind of makes sense. But then 3 or 4, I guess you would have gone to school down here. Are both your parents Canadian?
Dad's Canadian, mother's Scottish.
Oh.
Yeah.
How'd you guys end up in the United States?
She grew up in New Zealand too, which is a different thing, and then moved to Canada. They met, and then we got my dad got transferred down here when we were real young, and I've been here ever since. So
that's cool.
Yeah. It's funny. Most of my family's up and around Toronto. There's some in Vancouver, and they'll ask me like, "Hey, when are you gonna move back up here?" I'm like, "No,
it's too cold.
It's cold. It's flat. It's gray. Like, no, I like the mountains.
Sun, mountains, rivers, mosquitoes, but you'll live with that.
Yeah, they're fine.
Do you have any family in Scotland?
Not that I know of. I think my mother has some cousins there, but we're not
close or anything.
Yeah.
It's always cool to have people across the pond. You're like, that's family. I don't have any people across the pond. I just always think that would be cool.
Are you from here originally?
I'm from California. My mom is Filipino 100%. So she moved when she was in her 30s to the United States when she married my dad, who was in the Navy. A true American fairy tale. And, and my dad's his family's from Michigan, but he grew up in Orange County, California.
Okay.
So that explains my accent, which oddly, Toronto people are the only people that I feel like also sound like they're from LA. They don't sound Canadian to me. When I hear people from Toronto, I'm like, oh, are you from LA? And they're like, no, I'm from Toronto. Wild.
Yeah, everything sounds like a question whenever they're talking about it.
Yeah, then a little bit of that almost Midwestern type of thing. So Dr. Vito is going to tell us about, so I have a nagging wrist injury and I got the infamous from the doctor, don't do anything for 4 weeks. And how do you feel about that? Because I know I've read some of your newsletters, so I know you have strong feelings about it.
Yeah, first, anyone who does jiu-jitsu and they go to the doc, what's everyone's, you know exactly the doc's going to say, oh, you're doing what? Just stop doing it. And anyone who trains jiu-jitsu is like, yeah, that's not going to happen. Like, I'm going to go to class today. So, getting injuries like this, rest is almost never the answer. Sometimes it is. Like, if you have a broken bone, like, rest it, right? But most things like that, like when we were talking earlier, you most likely have a strain. And what you actually need to do is start loading it.
Oh, wow.
So it's really easy whenever somebody comes in to see a doc, whether chiro, MD, PT, whatever, and them to like do some tests and like hear you talk about it and be like, oh yeah, you strained your wrist flexors. It's even easier for me to just say like, take some NSAIDs, take time off. Take 4 weeks.
Literally what the doctor told me. And then I was like, hey, my stomach bleeds. And they're like, here, use a cream instead.
Yeah.
And I was like, I think that still makes your stomach bleed. It didn't. It was a lot better. But
That's good.
Yeah. And it did. I mean, it's hard to hurt it when it's sitting in a Velcro brace, not doing anything, even when you're sleeping.
Yeah. And it's hard to heal it too.
Yeah. I've noticed, this is actually something that I've noticed with this particular injury, is that the part that hurt started to feel better, but other parts felt worse. So after I took it out of the brace for the recommended amount of time, and then I would start to move it again because the other parts were tight. I'm like, my forearm feels really weak. I'm super in tune to that stuff because of jujitsu.
Sure.
But it's interesting because I'm like, that stuff didn't bother me when I had the injury and I was taping it up and just doing stuff. But now that I've immobilized it and all these other parts feel very weak.
So they did a research study recently that I was reading, and they took rats and they looked at their Achilles tendon underneath ultrasound. And when they first looked at the tendon, all the fibers are like running in this direction. They're all very uniform. And you're like, okay, that what a tendon you would think it looked like. They then casted these rats for 72 hours. No injury. They just put a little rat cast on their foot and took the cast off, and then did an ultrasound of the same tendon, and there was just dysregulation. Like it was, you don't have to be a trained like pathologist or someone to understand like, oh yeah, that's way different. So you look at all these fibers, and instead of them laying straight like a good healthy tendon, they're like going this way, and they're just all dysregulated
From being immobilized in the cast.
Yeah, for 72 hours.
Wow.
So that's 3 days, and then you go to see somebody, and you're like, oh, I sprawl. Someone shot in, got overstretched, and their answer is like, oh, I'll put a cast on it, rest it for 4 to 6 weeks, depending on how. And it's like, but that you're making it worse.
It hurt worse when I first put it in, and I told Lucas this. I was like, I don't know if this is correct because it was 72, maybe like 3 or 4 days. And it almost feels like when you're sitting on a plane and you don't move your leg, and then it just doesn't feel comfortable. And it was like that for a few days.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I'm going to do it because I don't have good health insurance, but
yeah. And even with good health insurance, the problem is that's all old science. Like whoever came up, the guy, I can't remember the name, the guy who came up with the rice.
I was actually going to ask you this.
Yeah.
Okay, keep going.
So,
yes, I'm very excited about this.
Okay. So the rest, ice, compression, elevation, right? That's kind of the old adage. Oh, you hurt yourself, like rice it. It's a great acronym, right? Rice, super simple, easy to understand. Very wrong. Rest. We don't want to completely ever rest something. We need to slowly move it and gently load it. So movement, not rest. Ice. Most things, ice is good for the first 24 to 48 hours. And then it provides some relief for pain. So it numbs the area. After that 24 to 48 hours, heat.
So is ice just for pain, or does it have healing properties too? Because I thought it was something about, I mean, I'll give you my dumb girl science that from, I don't know, just a normal person. I thought it was because it was supposed to reduce swelling so blood could get in there and heal things. And then that's why people told us to ice things. Is that why? I got a C in biology.
Yeah.
No one listened to me.
That was the original thought process.
Okay.
What it seems to do now is do better with numbing, and it might have some anti-inflammatory processes, but really heat has become the thing.
Okay.
Heat, not ice, for 90% of injuries. Like if you fall and you hit your elbow, put ice on it. It's going to feel better. But after 48 hours, go to heat.
It's like the icy hot situation where it gets cold and then it's the heat type of thing.
The Russians actually have a really cool protocol where they go back and forth. So they do extreme cold, extreme heat, extreme cold, extreme heat. Not kind of like, think like going cold plunge to sauna.
Okay.
And they'll do it for injuries, and that seems to have a really good
effect. Type of thing. I broke a finger last year, and this is also my dumb girl science, but I broke it, and then I didn't know it was broken for 3 days. And also like the doctor's office was closed. It looked bad. I like sent a picture and I was like, hey, is this like something as a normal jujitsu person? It's like swollen. It like was shaped like this and bruised, like completely purple. And because my friend who's an EMT did not want to diagnose me the way he said it was, hey, like when my finger looked like that, it was broken. So I went in, had an x-ray, it was broken. But I feel like because it was swollen for so many days, it didn't get displaced, even though it had a really weird, like long ways crack. But I felt like the swelling kind of pushed everything together because I didn't touch it for 3 days.
Yeah.
That's where I'm like, to me, when I'm thinking about ice reducing the swelling, then it feels like it would be more likely to get displaced. I don't know.
So that's actually a really good question. I hate to say it depends. If you have somebody who is like, so inflammation is there for a reason, right? Inflammation is starting to clear up and just help. I kind of think of it as like it's bad stuff. It's coming in and like clearing bad things out. If you had maybe a competition that weekend and you're a competitive athlete and you're like, I have to compete. We need to get that inflammation out as quick as possible so we can get some function back. But a little inflammation is good for healing. So it's kind of this weird balance of like, if you're longer term, you're looking for those longer term results. We need some inflammation, but we don't want it to get stuck there.
Okay.
And that's what happens. That's why the compression is great because it helps compress and like push fluid out. We just don't want it. We don't want it hanging around for too long.
Okay.
So
it's just, so what would you define like, I guess, stuck as? Is just like fluids that are not cycling through enough, or?
Yeah. So inflammation is moved through the body through movement.
Okay.
Right. This is why rice is not good, because if I have, we'll go back to the wrist, right? If I have some damage here in tissue, whether it's muscle, tendon, ligament, whatever the tissue, fascia, and then I don't move my arm, we don't ever get this pumping. So whenever we're moving our muscle, just like this, right? Muscles contracting and doing things. Think of it like a tube of toothpaste. If I have inflammation here and I'm pumping it, it's like squeezing, and it will pump inflammation back into the circulatory system, which it then goes and gets cleaned out and all of that. So movement is really the answer when it comes to helping clear out that inflammation.
That makes a lot of sense. This is where I have always wondered about some medical recommendations, because we reduce fevers, but I feel like fevers have a purpose. Inflammation has a purpose. Yeah. Like, why would the body do it if that's not what it's supposed to be doing to heal to a degree?
Exactly.
But I can see how helping it along in that kind of way. And then the ice would do the same kind of function where it like reduces it enough, and then the heat kind of helps push things through.
Yeah.
So if someone comes in and let's say they have I guess this is so hard because there's so many hypothetical situations. Someone comes in and they do jujitsu and they're like, I hurt something. What do you normally, I don't know.
How about give me something for yourself? Use yourself as an example.
Let's say like a knee, something in your knee hurts only when you squat and like not any other time when you're like coming up from a squat.
Like mid training?
Yeah, I had jumper's knee for a while, so that's what I'm specifically thinking of. But and then I ended up just doing a lot of the like very knees over toes type of stuff that seemed to help out.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. So first we have to understand what is the symptom generator, like what makes it worse. What's nice about whenever I see a lot of jiu-jitsu athletes, so it's nice whenever they come to see me and they're like, yeah, I was in K guard and I went to sweep and we ended up in X and then I wrestled up and came into this position. I'm like, oh yeah, like I know exactly what happened. So first we have to understand what happened and what the generator is. I'd say 95% of the time, if we have pain somewhere, it is not this is not the problem. So if we have a knee pain, the knee is not the actual problem. Unless somebody like jump guard and like landed on your knee and you pull out your ACL. Like obviously.
That's the thing. Yeah. That we heard it.
That's a knee problem. Exactly. But if it's like all of a sudden one day you're like, oh, like after training, like, oh man, knee's really tight. And whenever I wrestle up, I just feel it. Most of the time, that is because some sort of functional deficit somewhere else in the body.
Okay.
So first thing we want to do is we want to look at foot and ankle, how that connects to the ground, and we want to look at hip. If I am not, say I'm wrestling up, and that's the main thing that hurts my knee, and I'm not able to control, my hip isn't able to control how my femur is rotating, then my knee is going to take a beating because my hip isn't doing its job. I like to think of it like, if you remember in school, you get put in a group project.
Mm-hmm.
There's always one person who doesn't do shit, right? And there's one person who does everything. The person, right? The person who does everything, they're the ones who are pissed because they're like, you guys aren't doing any work, right?
Yeah.
I'm doing everything. Like, this is not good. So you are like the knee pain in that
going
that
on
scenario.
strike.
Yeah, you're like
stressed
pissed.
out.
Like,
Yeah.
hey, I'm the one doing all this work. You guys aren't pulling your weight. To fix that problem, we don't need to fix you. You're already doing all the work. We need to fix the people in the group who aren't pulling their weight.
That's an incredible analogy.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
How do jiu-jitsu people know like when it's bad enough that they should see someone? Because I feel like that's my struggle is I always give it a few days and I'm like, am I going to email my doctor again or am I going to wait it out? And then sometimes things do resolve itself because I am still moving and doing things.
Sure.
The only times I really took a hard break was this nagging wrist injury and then also my 2 fractures.
Yeah. Yeah. So obviously broken bones are like
A time thing.
take a break.
Yeah.
Movements where we're like, okay, this is not good, are sharp pinching type of movements, or ones that are starting to get more and more severe. Like, we know, obviously jiu-jitsu is it's a rough sport, right? The gentle art is not so gentle. But understanding when we're having clicking, popping, sharp pinching pains, anything with like numbness, tingling, like if you're getting that in your fingers, like, or in your foot or leg, like, go see someone.
Okay.
Yeah. It's really, it kind of depends on the person. The best time to get something fixed and the easiest time to fix it is like when it starts to be an issue. And if the longer people let these things happen, the harder and harder it is to fix. So like, I'll have patients come to see me, and it's generally females. Y'all are way better patients. Guys are like, they'll wait until they like walking in.
It's turning green.
And like, yeah, I can't move. Yeah. And they're like, yeah, I'm getting this like pinching overhead in my shoulder when I push or when I'm like framing. And I'm like, I move your arm around and we do some tests. I'm like, great, this is going to be a quick fix. Like, well, do some soft tissue on it. We'll get you some exercises, some breath work, different things to load the joint, and like, good. The longer people tend to wait, and it's like, now we got work to do. So it really depends on the person and what their comfort level is. But yeah, again, those red flags are sharp pinching pain, numbness, tingling, things like that.
How long should things heal naturally, I guess? If you're talking like a strain, like if someone's like, this hurts, and then it's like, I don't know, 8 weeks later, and they're still taping it up and don't know.
So it depends on what you do to help it. If you do nothing, it's going to take a while. And if you do nothing, it's going to create other problems. Because if I strain my wrist and now all of a sudden whenever I put my hand on the ground, say I'm posting or wrestling, now I don't put this hand on the ground, right? And I start using other things, it's going to cause problems elsewhere.
Like, because you're compensating and
you're compensating. Yeah. So it creates other issues as you go.
And is that what you're loading, I guess? Or are you just loading like the other people from the job that didn't, or like the group project?
So with a strain, we need to slowly load the tissue. Most jiu-jitsu athletes they are strain sprain until it gets to a certain point, and then it becomes much more difficult. So think of a strain sprain as like a cut in your hand.
Okay.
So it's essentially like the muscle fibers are torn. There's a cut. We can't just not use the hand at all because it's just going to get weak. It's going to get tighter. We need to be able to start to slowly move it around without making that cut worse.
Okay.
So that's the slowly loading. So it's hard to say Like,
so strains are kind of torn too, technically, then.
yeah.
When someone says like a tear or a strain, they're still tearing in the strain?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, there is an overstretched strain, but you just kind of think about it easier. It's strain is muscle tendon, sprain is ligament.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's actually very helpful.
Yeah. So strain is muscle tendon, sprain ligament.
Okay.
Sprains.
And both are or soft tissue.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Sprains are harder to get back. So when ligaments are damaged, they are much harder to fix. The muscles and tendons are easier because we can load them a little bit better. So it's, yeah.
Okay. That's helpful. And what's a jam? Yeah, what is a jam? Jam toes, jammed.
Yeah.
Lucas wants to know what a jam is.
So I think of the joint space, like between here. Whenever, say, I fall on my elbow and this joint space goes pops together, we have nerves inside of our joint, and so we've essentially just compressed that and pissed off all those nerves. Now your body and your brain realize like, shit, like something happened in the joint, and I call it protection mode. It'll have muscles around the joint go, protect, right? And like hold it, like, oh no, we're in danger. We need to like save this thing. So I actually had a patient Wednesday from Atos. She came in, jammed her thumb, and yeah, it was. So what we did is we worked on the soft tissue around the joint that was jammed. Release that. We did a manual therapy. We did some Graston, and then we did some loading of that tissue, and it became much better. We can also offload the joint a little bit by creating some gapping, but...
Wow, I would never guess that is the solution to a jam. Like when I think of like stubbing a toe or something, I'm like, I wouldn't even think that that's actually what causes it.
And so from like a chiropractor's standpoint, whenever we have like a crick in our neck and you're like turning like this, think of that as the joints in the neck have gotten jammed together. So where the joints in our neck are this little, they're called facet joints. Mm-hmm. So they slide and glide like this. In between each joint it's called a meniscoid, but it's like a meniscus in your knee. And what happens is that meniscoid can flip up on itself. And then whenever we go to rotate our head, we get that like sharp pinching pain. And you're like, oh.
I definitely get that. Yeah, I definitely can't turn to the right some days. It's normally something I was doing, right. But I would never guess that something's flipped up on the inside.
It's very small, but that's that sharp pinch when you go to rotate. And so that's similar to a jammed toe or a jammed finger where the joint is just compressed together. So if you go to a massage therapist, they're going to release the muscles and it's going to be great, but the joint's still jammed. If you go to chiro, they're going to adjust, which the adjustment is not a magical thing. Adjustments create motion in joints that aren't moving. So if I can't rotate my head, we can figure out which ones are, add a little pop, and gets back to it. The PT is going to have you do exercises. What we like to do here is all of that in one. Because like that, especially coming from jiu-jitsu, I mean, I've been training 14 years now, like it's a hard sport. Like you have to address the soft tissue around the joints. You have to mobilize them or adjust them when they get jammed. And then you have to load them and build them up to make them stronger so it doesn't happen again. So long-winded answer of jammed joint, whether it's a thumb, a neck, a toe, that is in my brain, that's what we need to do. We need to release the soft tissue work. We need to release that. We need to mobilize the joint, and then we need to load it so it stays that way. So
I have kind of a dumb question.
No dumb questions.
You know when you drill like foot locks or heel hooks, and you're tapping, it's just like you guys are just like drilling and drilling. And the next day you go to walk and you're like, I definitely feel that in my knee the next day, just a little bit. And then it goes away. It's like, I squat and do other working out and it doesn't hurt. Is that really bad for your knee? Or, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like that's just like such a common thing. Nothing got injured, but I'm like, I definitely feel it the next day.
What? Give me more specifics.
I'm just drilling a heel hook, ear tapping. You're literally just like working on braking mechanics.
Sure.
And then everything feels fine. And then the next day you're like, wow, that's just a little bit sore in the knee. And then I work out every day and like I didn't notice. When I'm working out, I don't realize it actually hurts. Like it's not a pain, but I just feel it in the morning a little bit.
You're
and I'm like, is that
something's there?
Yeah, something happens. Like, but then I'm like, I don't think it's injured because it stops hurting within 24 hours. But I'm like, what is actually happening to that ligament? I mean, we talked about this where we're like, is it getting stronger? Is it getting weaker? Is it tearing? Is it what?
So it's a change in the biomechanics, especially when it comes to a heel hook. Do you guys do you train to tap to pressure?
I tap when it feels I guess so. I just tap when it's like tight and it just feels, I don't know.
Okay.
Like if someone were to bridge into it, it would definitely break. Yeah.
Okay. So that's getting to the pressure.
Okay.
And it's fine, but it means the joint is locked out.
Okay.
And so if you're drilling that repeatedly, you're essentially adding especially if you're just just doing an inside heel hook.
Mm-hmm.
You're constantly creating an external rotation force through the tibia, and you're just stretching the knee a little bit, a little bit, a little bit. So that feeling is an overstretchedness through the tissue. I would not necessarily say immediately it's ligament or immediately it's muscle. Most likely it's connective tissue like fascia.
Okay.
So fascia surrounds all of our bones and muscles. I kind of visualize it like a giant spider web. So if we're constantly taking that spider web and stretching it a certain way, and you're letting it get to the point of like pressure, and if they bridge in, it's gonna. So you're like getting a deep stretch through that tissue, then letting off of it. Deep stretch through that tissue and letting off of it.
And it's not really like tissue that's meant to be stretched. Or is it?
All tissue is meant to be stretched and moved. I think where we get into problems is whenever we don't balance it out with other things.
Okay.
So I've seen a few meniscus tears in knees from jiu-jitsu athletes, and they almost always have a directional preference in how their knee rotates.
What's that mean?
So your tibia, your shin bone, rotates inwardly and outwardly slightly. There's a little mechanism there. Like a knee doesn't just go in this line. There is a little bit of rotation. So somebody with a meniscus tear, as it relates to jiu-jitsu, they almost always rotate their shin inwardly too much.
Okay.
And it's because of things like butterfly guard, a little bit. It's mainly things like wrestle ups. That's a really common thing.
Wow, I would never have guessed that.
Yeah. So as they're wrestling up and they're rolling over, they're creating this rotational factor. And if they're eating an outside heel hook, they're creating that same factor. So whenever somebody rotates in their knee, like all the way, like really well one way, and they don't go the other way, then it starts to damage that tissue.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess I should tap earlier when we're doing the training. It's hard. I guess also just maybe not running it so many times. I don't know. I guess it's not bad because the next day it's fine. I guess I was just wondering what happens or what causes it.
Long term is where it's an issue. So one thing we're actually doing here, I'm in the middle of writing a book, and we're putting together these courses. So the courses are really based off of like what jiu-jitsu athletes need to do off the mat to keep them on the mat. So for something like that, there's actually foot exercises that you can do that will rotate the tibia back to where it should be. And then you could just implement that into like a workout program.
So then it'll be balanced. You get the one thing in the class, and then outside of it, you're doing the other half, and it's not. Okay.
For sure. Like for me, I've been training 14 years. I've had every injury in the book. Like I'm missing ligaments in the ankle, torn meniscus, ACL. I had a disc herniation. I ruptured this pec totally off the bone.
We're like jujitsu's for everybody.
It's for everybody. But so now whenever the exercises I do off the mat are what keep me on the mat. And so it's honestly the way I practice here. I always tell people it's selfish because I want to learn the things that keep me training jiu-jitsu or mountain biking or playing disc golf or whatever else. I'm very active.
Yo, mountain biking's so dangerous.
Yeah, I know.
That's crazy that you do that.
Yeah.
I've only known like 2 people in my life that have done mountain biking, and they were like, hey, I was in the hospital because I like went down a hill into a tree.
Yeah.
I didn't even know it was like, when people say they mountain bike, you would not know it's that much of an extreme sport until you meet people who do it.
Yeah.
So very cool also.
I'm baby stepping that one. Yeah.
Okay.
So the exercises and the things you do off the mat can keep you on the mat longer. So instead of like a workout program off the mat, you're like, I'm going to work on my biceps and triceps. It's like, well, how about we work on shoulder stability and wrist and hand strength, right? So that way, if your wrists and hands are strong and loaded into these weird positions that we practice, someone shoots in on you and you get that pressure, you're like, oh, that was weird, but like,
I definitely had tight wrists before that. I thought this when I was going to work out in the morning, and I used to like warm up my wrists. And the last few days before that happened, I was like, I should probably work on my wrists more because this is going to really, and then it happens. And I was like, well, of course we do. So okay. Realistically, how much mobility stuff do you actually do off the mat? Like minutes per day for like realistically this plus like, I guess working out or something.
So I see both of those things as the same.
Okay.
The workout and the mobility. Mobility, when we look at it, is strength and flexibility combined. So somebody who's flexible is not necessarily somebody who is mobile. Like I've had people before, they can sit on the ground and grab their leg and put it into a full split.
But they can't do it with the leg.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're not like Jean-Claude Van Damme holding himself up over, fire. So that is the mobility. So you can just do workouts that provide that mobility and that baseline so that it's more efficient. Because I know it's like, well, I'm training once a day or twice a day.
And then you add it up and you're like, okay, if I do this stretching or whatever, and then all of a sudden you're like, God, that's like 25 more minutes on top of the other thing. And then that's.
So I'm OCD like hell for efficiency. So that's why I spend
love this.
I spend a lot of time picking and choosing the exercises that get the most bang for your buck. And that's a lot of like what we're trying to do with these courses is getting them out to people. So like, hey, you got to class 5 minutes early. Do this for your wrists, do this for your shoulders, do this for your hips, this for your foot and ankle, this for your core.
Oh, wow. So this is for athletes then, these courses. Okay.
Yeah,
I don't know why I was just assuming they were for providers.
No.
Okay.
These are going to be for jiu-jitsu specific athletes.
That'll be so helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who want to continue doing, and they want to like you don't want to spend an hour doing a yoga class or something like that. Yoga's great. Like I like yoga, but we only have so much time. And so if we can cherry pick the best exercises for 99% of jiu-jitsu athletes to balance the system out. Talking about like the knee rotation. If we can just get the right exercises to where we live in a good kind of neutral position and we strengthen there, then whenever you go to train, you're not worried like, oh, I'm going to do heel hooks and not be able to squat later.
And you're knowledgeable about what someone's doing for an hour outside of that, or I mean, in the actual class that they need to balance out, whereas somebody else might not actually have any idea. My doctor still doesn't even know what jiu-jitsu is. They just know I come in and that they're like, did jiu-jitsu get you again? I was like, yeah.
They don't understand like, oh yeah, I double leg somebody and then I knee cut and I felt this weird pop in my hip. And they're like, I don't know. Like,
even when I go in, I'm like, I have a skin infection. And I'm like, it's rustling. Think rustling. And they're like, oh, okay.
But like WWE, right?
They're like, why would you even think? Yeah. It's so, I was like, don't you have high school students? I know that there's a problem. Like, don't you guys know? I feel like you guys get paid the big bucks for this.
Right. Yeah.
Is it going to be like a digital course, I guess? Okay.
Yeah. The first one is going to be done hopefully by next Thursday.
Oh, wow.
So the first one is the perfect warm-up for jiu-jitsu athletes. If you're curious about it, shoot us a DM. Just say warm-up, and we'll send it to you. It's a free course, and it's really...
And what's your handle so people can send you?
Either Hybrid Spine and Sport,
okay.
Or you can do the _ninja_Cairo. That's my personal. So I took kind of the best bang for your buck that you don't need equipment for. That like, hey, if you get to class early, like do these exercises, it's going to prep the wrists, hands, get them stronger. It's going to prep shoulders. It's going to prep core. And then that really builds into, then you go and train and you're like, oh, like I can move better because I'm prepped for it.
That's going to be so helpful too for competitions because you don't have a ton of equipment and then you show up and it's like a cold audit. It's like a cold conference center.
Yeah, exactly.
You do your jogs and then sometimes, you do some kipping and like a couple other things. And you're like, good luck to me.
Yeah. All right.
Gonna go out on these dirty mats and hope for the best.
Yeah, it's really cool to see patients come back after doing the exercises too. And they're like, man, like so much stronger. Like I posted back here and normally it would have like pulled my shoulder and was like nothing. So
just the mobility. I have a rave review of Dr. Peter has not really been my doctor, but I went to him one time when I threw my back out and he gave me a cue for engaging my core and breathing properly that has changed my life, like legitimately.
That's good,
yeah, I've been, after doing recreational dance for 3 years and I did a ton of yoga, I had like always felt locked up in so many stretches. And because I was doing so many like dance cues with my core, the tip that you gave me, it's like completely unlocked. I'm so comfortable. I can do like a yoga squat super comfortably, just something I couldn't even dream of after doing yoga for 3 years before that. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I'm like, it works. The things that he does and knows actually works.
Yeah.
So
your breathing patterns dictates your core function. So if you have low back pain or shoulder neck pain, and you go to see somebody and they're not looking at how you actually use your core and breath and things like that, like anything's going to be a Band-Aid. So
it sounds so hippie, but it is legitimate.
Yeah.
It is very legitimate. I mean, I guess like breathing's a big part of yoga too, but I was doing like the whole belly button to spine. Yeah. And it just locked up my hip flexors like nothing else. And even the other day I was doing an exercise where we were just like lifting our hip flexors over a ball or lifting our legs over a ball for our hip flexors.
Sure.
And I was so comfortably sitting up and doing it. I'm like, wow, like a year and a half ago, I couldn't do this.
Yeah.
And I've tried doing so many similar exercises before that. I was like, could not even do it. And I was like, didn't even, no burning or anything. It was that easy.
Yeah. So I had a yoga. So that's a common cue in yoga. I had a yoga instructor came to see me. I think it was last year. She was in her mid 30s. She was like she was the definition of a yoga instructor, like handstands and full lotus and all the things. And she came in and she was in debilitating low back pain. And she sat down and she said, I took 2 days off of my yoga practice. Or no, I took 1 day off my yoga practice and I couldn't get out of bed for 2 days because my back hurt so bad. And she goes, that's how important yoga is. I was like, you can take a day off of yoga and not be so jacked that you can't get out of bed. Like, there's something wrong here. And so she had all the mobility in the world. She was super flexible. Like, okay, it's not a flexibility problem. And then we started checking her core. And so every time she went to brace her core, she would suck in, belly button to spine. And so she was wildly unstable in her lumbar spine. And so I was teaching her how to like, okay, well, we're not here. You actually need to push out and bear down. And she was kind of like, yeah, sure, dick. Like, she's like, I've been doing this for 10 years. I'm a yoga instructor.
It was the opposite of anything you'd hear in something that you're trying to get mobility in. Because you hear it in lifting. Like, it's not weird in lifting. Like, in lifting, everybody knows this. But then you go to dance or you go to yoga and everything's up and in. And then there's people like me that I think some people, their bodies can do it, but then their low back takes all of the, whatever the issue is. Because I have dancer friends who have the same problem where if they don't foam roll every single day for a really excessively long period of time, they're just in so much pain.
Yeah. Because they're
doing planks and stuff. Like, you look at it, you think they can do the planks, they can do the handstands, and you're like, how is it that's the core? Whenever
my low back was super tweaked and I was a lot younger, I remember I was sitting in a yoga class and there was this girl sitting next to me, and then the yoga instructor was this older Asian guy, very like Zen. And for some reason, she like looked at me and gently like pushed me on the shoulder, and I was like, what the hell? And like, she just kind of gently did this. And then she turned to him and like gently pushed. And it was like a rock. And then at that time, my low back was tweaked because that's how I was bracing everything. Like, and if you looked at me, like I had the abs and I looked like strong, but I was so weak. And changing that pattern, it's like, oh, I get it. Why?
I even
It's
walked
changed.
around like that because you think that that's how you're supposed to hold your core.
Mhm.
Like it was so, it took several months for me to change that and also like breathe into my entire diaphragm.
Mm-hmm.
It was just I gave it a chance. I was like, whatever, I'm in pain.
Yeah, I'll try it. Yeah.
Yeah. And then it was just shocking. The first time I do a lunge or the first time I do just even regular stretches that you do in yoga, it's like nothing was locked up. And I was like, what the hell?
Mm-hmm.
And then you feel really tight because now you feel the stretch.
Yeah.
And then you look and you're like, this is not what it looks like in the yoga magazines.
Right.
However, I feel the stretch.
Yeah. So our brain does this really cool thing, and this is relevant for like most jiu-jitsu people. They're like, oh, I'm so tight through here and through this. And it's like, well, are you tight or are you unstable?
Oh, wow.
Because if you're unstable, there's that like kind of emergency mode that your brain puts it into. So if my low back is unstable because it is doing too much work, I'm inverting too much, I'm not using my core, I'm not using my hips, my brain is going to say, hey, like this asshole's going to hurt his low back more. We need to find the hip flexors, turn the hip flexors, light them up, make them really tight, get the muscles around the spine, like tighten them up. So it takes all these muscles that are made for movement, like hip flexors, and tries to use them for stability because we're not using our deep base stability. Does that make sense?
Yes, actually it does. It's just, that makes a lot of sense because I feel like I would use my hip flexors for a plank.
Mm-hmm. Because you weren't using your core.
Because I wasn't using my core and I was doing all of the cues, but this makes sense now why that was so tight.
Yeah.
I also feel like I had the problem because I was just so inflexible for so long. I thought I was, and you read stuff and they're like, maybe it's the way your bones are shaped, whatever. You know what I mean? I mean, like I'm just on Google self-diagnosing myself all the time, whatever.
Sure.
And I realized like, even when I'm sitting in a, like a straddle now, I'm like, it was actually nice everyone's always like, sit up and do all the things. It was nice to lean against the wall and relax everything and actually feel a stretch.
Yeah.
Because for me, I'm definitely the person who overdoes everything. So then when you do stuff, everything's tight and then you can't stretch the thing you're trying to stretch. So now I'm like, I can comfortably do things that I couldn't do before because I was like, you know what, maybe. And I think I like that about jujitsu is jujitsu versus dance, where there's naturally sometimes the people who keep doing dance were kind of naturally flexible or other things like that. Jujitsu, some like CPA who's like 45 is over here trying to do an S mount. And like if his leg doesn't move that way, they're like, just lean and then you can move your leg, and you're moving that leg in that pattern for like 6 years, and all of a sudden you have mobility that you didn't have before.
Right.
And I'm finding myself to be a lot more mobile in jujitsu because I am moving in patterns that I never did before. And now, and I wasn't like trying to stay up, and like same thing with the yoga squat. I'm like, you're sitting there, you're trying to do all the things. And then now that I'm just squatting all the time in jujitsu, I can comfortably squat and do all the correct, like, knees out cues, but I didn't start that way.
Yeah. Yeah, and jiu-jitsu.
You can correct me. I won't be offended. Like I'm also, I know I'm dumb. I use a lot of Google.
No, this is good. Yeah, so I call jiu-jitsu is like that forced flexibility too, right? Like it is the movement patterns, and that does make people more flexible. But if you have somebody smash passing you and your knees like push them to your chest, and you're like it's gonna open your hips. The problem is that the patterns that it creates are very asymmetrical.
Okay.
So over time, those asymmetrical patterns turn into bigger things. This is why I think, the old adage of like, white belts get there and they're trying to learn the warm-ups, and then blue belts are there and they're doing all the warm-ups 100%. Purple belts don't do warm-ups, and brown belts are all injured.
Yeah.
Right. And then the black belts have just worked through the injuries and they're, stick with it. That progression to me is like, well, you got so invested in this one sport, in this one movement pattern, this one movement cycle, that it progressed you. It's like, in my brain, I'm like, oh yeah, of course. Like you started, you learned it. Oh, you went really hard at it. You stopped doing it. And then now you're just injured. So
if you stuck with it at all, there's like less brown belts than purple belts, if they get that far. I know also there's that saying in jiu-jitsu, well, you want to be good at it on one side than bad on both sides. at something, I play a couple of my guards on one side because I just my brain connection on the other side is not great. But I drill so much I had to start drilling on the opposite side because it was just you overuse one side way more than the other, especially if you're playing your guard on one side.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely that is definitely part of it. The other part is just whether you're side to side, there's just so many repeat patterns that we see with jiu-jitsu athletes, and that's what keeps them chronically injured.
Okay. Is that like, for example, I don't know, maybe I'm right or wrong about this, but like if you frame a lot, I heard that like, because I had at one point I was like doing some kind of lifting and I was like, is my elbow irritated? And the personal trainer that I was working with was saying like, oh yeah, did you do a lot of guard retention this week? And I was like, I did actually. And it was just like, I just had my like arms like less than 90 degrees for a lot of the week and like was just doing a lot of, we were just doing framing and reframing and regarding and a lot of those drills.
So, for instance, like a frame, if I'm not engaging my shoulder blade stability whenever I'm framing, then I'm using all of my elbow to frame and like some of the shoulder, but it's not really strong. Is
that kind of like an isometric hold too? Because I mean, I guess it's still moving, but you're not supposed to push. You're supposed to wedge.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so there are. Like a proper frame is, we're not trying to force somebody away. But if I know, like, this looks like a frame and this looks like a frame.
Okay.
The second one is stronger and going to protect my arm.
Because you're using more muscles.
Exactly. Yes.
Your lats and, I don't know, anatomy.
Serratus anterior.
The C- in biology.
So if we can...
I don't even know how to spell that, man.
And that's why I keep coming back to like what you do off the mat keeps you on it. So if you practice those type of exercises where I'll literally have people holding like elbows on the ground. I had a black belt from AOJ here. He's one of my patients, and he was here this morning, and we were just having him do like a basic, almost like turtle, but having him lock his shoulder blade in the right way. And he's holding for like 2 breaths and like shaking.
Wow.
Because he's not used to using these deeper stability systems.
That's wild. And then you just have like the muscle memory, so you don't have to think about it when you're in the middle of a competition getting smashed.
Yeah.
Or doing the smashing, as we would like to.
Yeah, there you go. And so what's nice then is it's not only just getting out of pain, but now you're stronger, right? So now when you go back to training, like you're using your body the right way. So now it works better. So.
Wow. I do try. Since I've started working out, it's been helping. But the lifting, I've had to lift a lot. I never lifted before. I was one of those, I don't want to be too bulky kind of girls. Also, this is weird. I've mentioned it on another one of my podcasts, but because you do brace your core out, I wear t-shirts to work out now because I feel like girls, like the stuff that we work out in, like sports bras and like whatever, it's just you don't want to stick your stomach out and flex and do some of these things. So that's oddly, I'm like, if anyone's listening and they're a girl, I don't know if that helps you, that you can just work out in a t-shirt and maybe brace your core properly for 7 months.
A way to kind of, I don't want to say get around that, but not be as self-conscious. So a good exhalation. So as I exhale all the air out, I let my rib cage pull down. Once I breathe all the air out, I take a nasal inhale into my belly.
Okay.
And that's solid. So if I start already inflated and then I press down and I push out more, I'm going to look
more
rounder through there. But if I exhale all the air out and then I do a nasal inhale into the core and maintain that rigidness, you get the same benefit of using your core the right way without like being self-conscious.
I also have a question. I don't know if it's like right or wrong, but something that I learned from coming from like yoga and then doing lifting is that we're so used to doing like 1 breath per movement, and we can't do that in jiu-jitsu because we do a lot of movements on 1 breath. And I don't know if it's bad or not, but I started sometimes when I work out, like just seeing how long I can breathe while doing like multiple reps. I don't know if that's the most efficient or whatever, but you know how like normally be like, you'd like do your like 1 breath. I'm like, I just will sometimes do 3 reps in 1 breath and see how that goes.
It's good to be able to, so when it comes to breath, I need to be able to stay strong and stable through my midsection just as I'm breathing. So that way we can this mechanism isn't necessarily tied to movement, but it's always online. So I'm always more stable. So not like yoga, inhale, expand, exhale, fall, things like that. But like you can't do that rolling. But
or you'll hyperventilate like a white belt in competition.
Exactly.
Because that's what happened to me. I was like, why am I? I'm like, every time I framed, I was like,
if we can retrain the pattern.
I'm not proud. I'm like just trying to be, I don't know, open and vulnerable and tell everybody the truth.
I totally get it. My second patient this morning, he competed last weekend at Naga, and he said it was his first tournament, and he gets up to like, you know, about to step on the mat, and he said he can hear the guy he's about to compete against. He's over there going. He's like an older guy. He's like in his late 30s. He's got kids. He's like, what?
If that's not
doing?
The description of a competitor at Naga, though,
yeah,
a master's
I was
first
like,
time.
y'all are masters white belt division. Like, let's we're not going into war here. Yeah. So he's like, yeah, we got out there, and I thought the guy would try to murder me. So yeah.
You see it in their eyes and the breathing.
Yeah. No, it definitely plays a big role. If we can change the pattern of that, then you can just always have this core stability. And so what we do is we build patients from like a really baseline, like how do you even do this? And then it builds into through an exercise progression, like rehab program, into like now you're doing this during warm-ups. Oh, we're able to do this mid roll. And now all of a sudden you're like, holy shit, like I'm much stronger and my gas tank went way up. Because one breath through your diaphragm is equivalent to 4 to 6 up here.
Oh, I get what you're saying now.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why it's like, okay, hold on. So what you're talking about is like if your core is properly braced and your diaphragm breathing, then it's like the 4 upper breaths versus like taking a very deep breath and doing multiple things, and you're training to do that. Or did I get that wrong?
Yeah, no, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah. So if we once we change the pattern, 4 breaths here, 1, 2, 3, 4 is equivalent to 1 down low.
Okay. Someone else is listening and they're like, Rachel, he explained it fine.
No, that's good.
I'm just sitting here. I'm like, okay, let me make sure I get this straight.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
this makes a lot of sense.
No, questions are good.
Yeah. I mean, people can swim on 1 breath, so I guess it's or like 1 held breath.
Mm-hmm.
Just thinking of different kind of motion patterns with breathing, the actual taking in the air versus, I don't know, and then like providing your cells with energy and things like that.
The best breathers that we see here are singers.
I can't sing. Ugh, that's why I'm bad at this. Everything just went full circle for Rachel. Not flexible, can't sing. Makes a lot of sense.
Yes. But yeah, they have had the training, I guess, on how to like actually use their diaphragm. So.
I had a teacher who had, because I did take voice lessons, believe it or not, for someone who can't sing. This is how I know I can't sing. I went to a teacher. But she had like one of those like, it's like a belt, just like the loop belt, and then she would like put it around here, and that way I could breathe into the belt in the back, because apparently I was not doing that. And she was like, you need to breathe everywhere. And I was like, I don't understand. She's like, try to hold the belt open. And like it was just so hard for her because my brain just does not talk to my diaphragm like that.
Yeah. There's a device or a tool, I should say, called a Core 360 belt, which I'll prescribe to patients who are having trouble with it. It's kind of like that same thing. It wraps around. This one has little like balls that kind of go around it, and it gives you that little somatic cue, or you can feel where those are, and you can breathe into that type of thing. So
it's so crazy because there's people out there like me who are just like doing all the planks and doing all the stuff, and they're still totally unstable. Because there's just so many other components of how your body works with your brain. And then also you're doing it under stress when someone's trying to strangle you, which is just a whole different element.
It's a different thing, yeah.
Yeah.
Once you understand how, and then you can change the patterns, that's where we get really cool results. Does that make sense?
Keep going.
So, for instance, like talking about the core and breathing and bracing for low back. If then we can change, and you've kind of alluded to it, you're like, wow, I can do these movements now where I couldn't have done them before.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Right. So once we change the pattern, that's where we get really, longer term results.
It was also so crazy because it was just one thing. That's just one thing changed.
Yeah, that was just one.
Not like 100 things.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm like, now I'm lunging different. I'm squatting different.
Mm-hmm.
I can't even imagine some of the movements in jiu-jitsu that I probably would never have been able to do. I'm like pistol squatting really easily.
Mm-hmm.
Just so many different things that I could not do before.
Yeah.
Where it would just give out. My knee would hurt.
Yeah.
Then you just assume you're old.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, oh, I'm old. I'm 35. But it's like in the world of jiu-jitsu.
Yeah. I had a patient last week. We've been working on that, and he was telling me he was at the gym pressing overhead. He's like, oh, he's working his core breath the right way, and he presses it. He's like, holy shit, that was 70. That was easy. Let me try an 80. That was like,
just breathing.
Yeah, and he's like, this is crazy because he wasn't even doing that before he got injured. So
I also, with the core thing, now that this just reminded me of it, I also can reach over my head now and like load things and like drop my shoulders. And the other thing too is, you think about posture, you're like, people like stand up straight and do things like that. And I'm like, even that is completely different from the core stuff.
Yeah.
I did, because I'm an actor, I did Alexander technique once, and it was a lot of like weird awareness things, and that was helpful too. Okay. I don't know how you feel about that. I don't
know what it is.
Oh, Alexander technique is like something, it's like a mind body connection thing. But the particular teacher that I had, she worked with patients who had, I think, Parkinson's disease too. Oh, that's cool. And like it'd be like you're sitting down and it's like standing up. She's like envision being like a dolphin coming out of the water, and she had really good like visualizations. But a lot of violinists need to use it because they tense up on one side, and so they have to like learn to like relax without having to do a lot of other things.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, and she was talking about patterns too, where somebody came in and like his shoulder hurt. And they were trying to figure out what the cause of like this chronic pain he had for a really long time was. And then they realized his front door was like on an incline. And every time he opened it, he would like brace a certain way. And they figured out that that's what it was. Yeah. And just like, I even notice now where I'm like writing, I'm like, why are you tensing all those other muscles?
Yeah, exactly.
It's that kind of thing where you like sit there and like, even like you're like sitting and like holding a phone in bed and you're like, okay, we gotta stop doing all that.
Yeah. It's, changing those patterns is the thing. 'Cause it's like, if you have shoulder pain or neck pain, you go get a massage and you're like, great. Oh man, I feel awesome. And then you walk around and you're breathing like this all day,
driving,
or stressed, or you're pushing into the door, and then you hold your arm like this for the rest of the day. It's like, it's just going to get tight again.
Yeah, so. It's so crazy that's just like what, I don't know. And then kids don't do that. You're 2 years old and you're walking around and you're just squatting and like moving so great. And then by the time you hit 35, you're stressed out and have bills and you're like, now all of a sudden you can't hold a pen without tensing your right shoulder all the way up to your ear.
Yeah, I think there's a weird like societal change that happens for most. And I don't really know where or when. I think just over time, people develop these bad movement patterns. Like right now, we're sitting on a couch.
I was like, he's probably like, we're on one side. I thought about this because the Alexander technique teacher would be just lighting me up when we're sitting like this with the one hip going down. We're going to have to balance this out later.
Right. Yeah. We're sitting on chairs. We're not squatting, and just holding a squat.
We're also sitting at like the worst angle.
It's all right. Yeah.
It's not too bad.
Not too bad.
We're definitely going to have one stretched outside though. But, and then,
where was where did you do that?
I did it. She was a New York teacher, so she learned it in New York, and then she came down here and she was doing it through an acting, like a Meisner studio that I was going to. They've moved because of COVID. I have to like re-find all of the acting stuff because all the theaters like shut down and then reopened. But she was doing it through the Rob Mello studio, and then they offered the class, and I just like that was the first time I realized how much tension I have doing everything. And she also talked about, what is standing up straight. And for me, it turned out I needed to relax a little bit more and not tense and bring my shoulders back. Cause then, and like one shoulder was doing a thing. And I'm like, that doesn't necessarily mean you're standing up straight. Sometimes you just got to relax and,
Yeah. They're the people who get overly hyper aware about like stand up straight. They tend to like jam everything back, which can cause issues here. It can also cause issues in the back because we should be expanding we should be balanced in the middle. We should never just be rigid as we're holding throughout the day.
Yeah.
Everything should kind of be moving. So
one of the things we talked about too is just like how this is natural for women, but you're on a train or like a plane and you like want to be smaller. And she's like, relaxing doesn't actually take up that much more space.
Mm-hmm.
And like that happens where you tense next to somebody and you're like, you don't need to do that. Like this isn't even, that's just all you.
Mm-hmm.
I think this too, where I'm like, Rachel, it's just all you. And I'm like, you also do jujitsu and touch people all the time. So I was like, now you're going to hurt because you're 8 hours on a plane like this, uncomfortable, when you could have just sat there and and done that. Well, where can everybody find you? I already mentioned your handle one time, but give it to everyone again and the information about your course, because we've hit our hour.
Sure. Yeah, we're Hybrid Spine and Sport, Instagram. My personal is _ninja_Cairo. We're going to be launching the first course. We're going to try and do a ton of them. It's just going to start with the perfect warm-up. So it's going to be a free course. We're just kind of seeing how it goes. And then, we look forward to it. Just, again, if you want to get that free course, just DM us course and we'll send it to you.
Okay, awesome. Thanks so much for being on.
Thank you.